Okay, let's get this out of the way. I'm not going to break down the Dawn of War 4 trailer. There are plenty of YouTubers doing that frame-by-frame CSI level analysis, and honestly, their content is chef's kiss. What I'm here to do is something maybe potentially a little bit different. I kind of want to tell you what it's like replaying Dawn of War Definitive Edition after all these years. I grabbed it for £21 on Steam. Cheaper than a dodgy takeaway, way more satisfying. And here's why you should probably grab it too. So let me start by saying that this game has aged like Sean Connery in A League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. It's grizzled, it's a bit rough around the edges. Still cooler than anything that's come since. I grabbed Definitive Edition for what I would fairly say is a bargain. And then I blinked and suddenly I'd smashed the whole campaign way faster than I care to admit. I woke up the next day feeling like I'd got a hangover and thought, well, winter assault for breakfast it is then. That was a planned joke, wow. Suddenly, well yeah, it still slaps. I've played my fair share of Warhammer games. Some good. Some feel like they were made by an orc with a keyboard. But Dawn of War and its expansions, they're still top dog. Dark Crusade in particular, absolutely fantastic. That's the kind of game that you want to like print out and slap in front of Creative Assembly with a note that says, do this, do it now. Because you know they're going to get there eventually, and then we're all going to pretend like we didn't see it coming and we haven't been, slapping it in front of them for ages. So here's the thing, right? This isn't the glorious remaster of our dreams. It's not like a Final Fantasy VII remake. It's more like slapping on a fresh coat of Dulux over your nan's old wallpaper. Technically 64-bit now, which is great because your PC won't collapse like England in a World Cup quarter final, but the game underneath, same as it ever was. I guess you could argue that for around 20 quid for a game you might already own twice, maybe even thrice. Hell, maybe some of you bought the box copy, the Steam copy, the complete collection in a humble bundle that you don't remember buying. I don't know, I'm not here to judge. And now Relic's back at the bar, like being like, oh, mate, fancy another one. It's daylight robbery, right? But we're all mugs and we're all gonna pay it and then play it anyway. Because compared to what we waste our money on, like I mentioned earlier on, dodgy takeaways, maybe gym memberships that we don't use at all, and that one Warhammer miniature that you swore you didn't need, it's still a bargain. 20 more years of nostalgia-fueled orc smashing, it's absolutely a bargain. But big question, do the changes actually matter, or is it just Relic kind of like selling us Warhammer with a shinier hat? I did actually see lots of people kind of cranking out the anniversary edition for a side-by-side, so I did the same. And it suddenly felt like I was crouched down in the mud next to my units, hi. We talked about Sean Connery, right? Whispering. Oh, lads, mind if I tag along? Wow. Hi. What the fuck? The Definitive Edition fixes that. Camera zooms way better. You can finally like pull back far enough to actually see the battlefield instead of feeling like you're filming a Michael Bay close-up of a Space Marine's arsehole. And suddenly, that alone, it kind of makes a huge difference once the big scraps are kicking off. Watching entire armies clash from a proper zoomed out view, it does feel like micromanaging an unruly football team and more like directing Braveheart if everyone had chainswords and no kilts on. It's also going to be a godsend for mods that crank up the scale, because let's be honest, half of us aren't happy until we've got 3 Baneblades and an army of guardsmen lagging our PCs into oblivion. And then there's, like I mentioned, the 64-bit bump and the new mod manager. Is it sexy? No. But for the modding crowd, it's like Viagra and patch notes. Mods are the lifeblood of Dawn of War, and this makes sure that the old girl's still running strong for another 20 years of cursed Thomas the Tank Engine as a Titan experiments. We all love that, right? So yeah, if you're here just for the campaign, the changes, they are nice. If you're here for the mods, they're bloody essential. The real MVP, though, is Pathfinding. Sweet Emperor, they've actually fixed it. If you remember the original where your Land Raider would get stuck on a random sandbag like a drunk uncle tipping over the dog at Christmas. Yeah, looking at you, uncle. Or then when you'd have to like blow up your old turrets just to kind of let the damn thing out the base, that's gone. Now vehicles, they just ghost through each other like they're starring in Ghostbusters, Mechanicus edition. Watching Baneblades politely phase through each other instead of doing that 23-point turn is honestly worth the upgrade alone. So here's the thing, if you literally just played through the campaigns like last month, then yeah, probably not worth dropping another 20 quid just so your Marines look slightly shinier while they're shouting for the Emperor. But if you've never touched Dawn of War before, first of all, why? What have you been doing? Touch it. Or if, like me, it's it's been a good few years since you dusted off the bolter, then honestly, this is the way to go. This is the way, Mandalorian. The definitive edition, it just feels like the proper, like, no-brainer version now. Everything's bundled, it runs smooth, the new mod manager actually works instead of feeling like a dodgy fan tool from 2007, and it plays nice with all the mad mods that people have been cooking up for like decades. Performance-wise, it's like smooth as a pint of Guinness on a Sunday afternoon, mostly. I didn't run into any frame drops or stutters, which is impressive considering the amount of like DACA on the screen sometimes. So I've basically reached the conclusion that this game is the die-hard of RTS games. It doesn't matter how old it gets, you throw it on and it's still an absolute banger. Playing through the campaigns, it reminded me of Age of Empires too, you know, the game that just refuses to die. Gets a new edition every 5 years and somehow always ends up installed on your hard drive. It's the same deal here. Instead of just build base, smash base, repeat, every mission feels like it's tied into the story, like you're not just playing an RTS, you're acting out the most violent episode of Game of Thrones never filmed. And the flavour. The unit design is still great. The sync kills are still incredible. Watching a Space Marine body slam an orc is basically the grim, dark version of like The Rock just elbow dropping someone in WrestleMania. You can practically hear Jim Ross screaming, "By God, he's broken in half," every time it happens. Like I mentioned, if we're going back to MVPs, like the voice acting, I can't express this right. The orcs, they sound like they've escaped from like Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels. Chaos Marines are like Ozzy Osbourne, like gargling gravel at a Black Sabbath reunion. Was that too soon? I don't know. The Imperial Guard, proper cannon fodder vibes. Like the blokes from Dad's Army have drafted into Saving Private Ryan. Hi, can't talk today. Private Ryan. And Space Marines, well, they sound like they'd lecture you about tax codes while drop kicking a demon, and it's glorious, right? And it's why it works. It's not just strategy, it's theatre. Shakespeare with Chainswords. It's Lord of the Rings if Boromir respawned after 30 seconds and shouted about requisition points. And honestly, it still hits harder than half the stuff shoved into Game Pass today. You can really see Relic getting cheeky with the formula in the later expansions, Dark Crusade and Soulstorm. They went full risk board game mode, dropping in overworld maps so you could stomp around like conquering territory like a chainsword wielding like Napoleon. But the beauty of it was when you actually attacked a faction stronghold, you weren't just slapped into a generic skirmish map. You got these wild bespoke missions that felt like boss fights in RTS form. It was like moving from Street Fighter 2 arcade matches in like a full-on Mortal Kombat story mode. Same game, but with just enough extra spice to keep you hooked. And that core system, like unit caps, reinforcing squads on the fly, grabbing strategic points, fighting over relics for the big toys, timeless. The loop of hold, hit this hill, grab that resource, unlock something absurdly overpowered is basically RTS comfort food. It's so simple and endlessly replayable, and it became the perfect playground for mods. No wonder Dawn of War ended up with like a modding scene so deep it makes Skyrim look like amateur hour. But here's the bit that gets me right. This thing actually feels like Warhammer 40K. I've chewed through more books, like more Black Library novels, than is probably healthy. In Dawn of War, it nails that same grim, dark rhythm. Land on a planet, try to establish order, and then watch everything unravel as every other lunatic faction piles in. It's grimdark storytelling 101, just like the 40k version of Jurassic Park. You've barely like set up the fences before hell breaks loose, right? And it works, whether it's on the page, on the tabletop, or in a 20-year-old RTS. That formula, it never stops being fun. And that's why Dawn of War, it feels fresh 2 decades later. It's not just nostalgia, it's because Relic have bottled the essence of 40k storytelling and slapped it into a strategy game. You're not just moving toy soldiers around, you're living through a Black Library plot where everybody's doomed, and the only question is who explodes most stylishly. Anyway, I'm only going to implore you one time to please do all those things you need to do to support my tiny channel, and I hope to see you in the next video.